Hi, I'm Matt Dalton, and I'm about to sit down with George Lagarias, our chief economist, to talk about what's happening in the economy and what the impact is on the consumer sector. I hope you enjoy it. George, all this market volatility we're seeing at the moment, is that threatening consumer behaviour?
For the retail sector to suffer significantly, you will need to see that sort of volatility being protracted. But the good thing is that now we know how to deal with this market volatility, and because we know that if it persists, there are going to be a lot more problems, central banks are probably going to step in maybe at some point in the next few months, way before this has had a chance to become a problem for the consumer sector.
George, what is the wider consumer outlook?
Consumers will definitely slow down expenditure. Consumers are afraid, but there is a silver lining here. If, for whatever reason, energy prices begin to drop, we could see a lot more money funneled into consumption. Again, a lot of that is energy driven. So the outlook right now is one of a slowing economy, not one that would destroy retail companies. They can do a lot of things. They can curtail expenses, they can button down the hatches in terms of risks they're open to and that sort of those sort of actions. But ultimately, consumers will probably feel the pinch. They will stop consuming so much. They'll go for opportunities where they can find them, and sales and flash sales and all of that. It's going to slow down, but it's not going to be destructive.
We're already seeing sales decline. If you look at the year-on-year sales results, some of that's masked by the increase in prices that have been pushed through. But surely there must be a limit to how much price can be pushed through to consumers.
Yes, after a point, consumers will just stop buying, and that's pretty much been happening. I mean, especially in the UK, we've seen a significant slowdown of sales. But if there is something that the pandemic showed me was that it's easy to say I'm not buying this, but I will buy that.
We have less money in our wallets. So if you're a retailer at the moment, how do you go from here? What's next?
Well, that's very difficult. The first thing you need to obviously do is you need to plan for lower revenue. And to do that, you're going to start cutting costs. In fact, that's how a recession usually works. Cutting costs usually means laying people off. And that means higher unemployment. So retailers will probably need to go into cost-cutting mode. They will need to make sure their operations are airtight. And the most important thing is really not cost. The most important thing is to prepare themselves for shocks. Shocks like we saw in the pandemic, or shocks like the ones we saw in 2008 in the global financial crisis. Okay, so what they need to do is they need to make sure that their businesses don't have any points where they're particularly vulnerable from. They need to make sure that their debt levels are manageable and that their debt is serviceable, and they need to curtail cost. It's not just that they need to prepare themselves for lower revenue, they need to prepare themselves for shocks.
And if you're a CEO, what would you be most concerned about at the moment?
The first thing I would do is call all my internal auditors and I would ask where are our biggest risks. I would, from a regulatory perspective, from a supply chain perspective, everyone that can uncover major risks. Okay, the problem with risks is that nobody pays attention to the smaller risks until they actually become a problem. But they really need to have a clear thinking about what the risks currently are. Again, the second one should be try to make sure that debt is manageable. Okay, a lot of CEOs, what they did in the past few years was that they preferred to be financed with debt rather than equity, because debt was cheaper. Now we're reaching the point where debt is very expensive if you want to roll it over. So they need to make sure that they can pay off their interest, they can pay off the capital that they owe. At the same time, they also need to make sure that their supply chains work. This is the hardest part, because on top of all of this, you actually need to invest money, you need to do capital expenditure in supply chains.
Well, thanks, George. It's been a fascinating conversation. I've learned a lot, and thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Matt. Very nice to be here.